Hello and welcome to Adoptee Conversations from the Adoption and Fostering Podcast. In this episode, I chat to Tanya, an adult adoptee and an adoption social worker, and she shares her story and discusses her unique perspective working within the system. Some aspects of this podcast are difficult to listen to, so as always, listen with caution, and if you've got any doubts, then ask a friend to listen first. We hope you find it interesting, and if you're an adoptee and would like to share your perspective or experience, then please do direct messages at our Twitter feed or on our Facebook page.
I am Tanya and I am an adoptee and a therapeutic social worker.
When did you first know or first realise that you were an adopted person?
So I'm a classic case of, I guess I always knew I was adopted. My parents, I don't remember ever being told I was adopted. Don't remember having those conversations. It was very kind of just always knew. We had a book on the shelf called Jane is Adopted that was always kicking around, but I don't even remember reading it actually. I just knew it was there. I think I saw it as like my brother's book. Don't know. Just always knew.
And so, as you were growing up, what did that mean to you? What did that mean anything, or was it just information, or was it something that was more than that?
I don't remember ever having any deep thoughts about it when I was a kid, really. It was kind of, I knew that I'd been born to different parents, that I'd lived with my current parents since I was 6 days old, my adoptive parents since I was 6 days old, and that was that. It was just kind of a story, I guess. Mm-hmm. But I never had any kind of big thoughts about what it meant to who I was as a person, or what it meant for my identity or anything like that. It was just kind of very,
Did that change as you grew older?
Yes, but not in a straightforward manner, I don't think. I guess I started thinking about it. I used to chat to my friends at school about it, and they would always talk about going to search for what they would call your real parents, and that term still gets bandied about quite a lot, and there's quite a lot of strong feelings about that term. But we'd have conversations about that the long last family style, real excitement about it. And I had another adoptive friend at school, and we used to chat about it. But I mean, it wasn't very often, and so that was when I was not even a teenager. That was at primary school, or when I was just at initial high school. And then when I got a bit older, I kind of I didn't really put too much thought to it at all in my later teenage years. But then I decided in my early 20s to search for my birth parents. So that's when it all changed.
What made that shift from being what sounds like not that engaged with that sort of, or perhaps focusing on that, but then all of a sudden that's a big step, isn't it?
I think I was too consumed in getting through life as a teenager, and kind of just getting through those years to even really put any effort into thinking about that. And I think the spark in me was in my early 20s, when I'd moved away from home, and I'd set up my own little life in Leeds. I was working in the Cockpit, which was quite a famous live music venue for any live music fans out there. I was just going to start going to university, and my mum had moved abroad, and I just had my own little life, and so I was maybe kind of figuring out who I was a bit, starting for my birth parents.
So what was the process? How did you go from sort of thinking, right, I want to do this? How do you then make the first step? What does that look like?
So 2000 and what was this? 2007 maybe? 2000. I can't remember. I can't remember how I first thought about doing it, but I know for a fact that I didn't think to go straight on social media and do it, which is what most of the teenagers I work with now do. I was on Facebook, but I don't think I didn't even think to look on it. So I knew that I had to write to social services. So I wrote to local authority that I was adopted through, and they told me to contact my local authority. So that's what I did. So I went through the official channels, and I was assigned a social worker who is a really, really good friend now, and she was really amazing, and she got my files for me, and she did a bit of counselling with me beforehand, and then she said, we can't do any of the searching for you, you have to go do the searching yourself, which I did. I went off and did on my own, because I didn't have anyone supporting me through the process apart from my social worker.
Was that because did you keep that process away from your adoptive parents, or was it that they were not interested, or just circumstances?
A bit of everything, really. I'd told my adoptive parents, and I'd told them with quite a bit of, not warning, warning, I guess, that, I knew that it could bring up really strong emotions for them, especially for my mum. And so I did give them quite a bit of warning that I was thinking of doing it, and they were both really supportive. But but my mum lived away, abroad, and my dad lived 75, 80 miles away, so part of it was just circumstance as well.
How did they sort of react to that when you told them?
Initially supportive. Yeah, I mean, my dad was a lot more supportive than my mum was, and my dad was really curious. Yeah, and I think, both initially supportive. My dad remained supportive throughout the whole process, and he was, he wanted to meet my birth parents. That never got to happen, unfortunately, but I kind of kept it all at a bit of arm's distance, but but my mum, when she found out and when it actually happened, she couldn't deal with it at all, really. Yeah, and she became very, very upset by it all.
Yeah.
Which, is not uncommon.
Mm-hmm. And was that a pressure? Did that just...
Oh, huge. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, really not very pleasant to go through at all. Yeah. No one wants to hurt their parents, and I wasn't doing it intentionally, but that was the outcome. And I understand that it's not my issue to hold at all, but you can't help but feel the pain for someone, and really difficult. And that's not done our relationship any good at all. But I understand it, but I don't understand it at the same time. Yeah.
It's odd, because talking to several people who've been through that experience is that it stops being about them. It becomes about everyone else, and very rare. It's trying to hold so many other people's considerations and feelings and emotions that that when it should be about you. It's this moment that is about you. Yeah,
but that's the thing. I think for a lot of adoptive adopted people, the story's never about them, really, is it? You know, everybody's made decisions about their lives without them being they've not been at the centre of those. They've not been able to have any choice over the decisions, and other people own their story. Social services own their story. Whoever owns their story, they don't get their full story. I find it a lot. And then everybody else has such strong emotions about their place in the family and what they mean to everybody. And it's like, well, hang on a minute. What about me, and what about how I feel? And I just think that's very common, right, for lots of adoptees.
So from that point, you started to search with all of this kind of quite a complicated sort of background to you. You've experienced some counselling. What was that counselling? I mean, I know people do get counselling, some people don't. But you say you had counselling, but before you started to actually search, what was that? What was that looking to achieve? I mean, it's maybe an obvious question, but...
Well, just for what you might find out. I think it was just kind of, do you know what you're starting here? Do you know what journey you're going on? Are you prepared for it? Do you know that you might find out that your mum, you might, it's whatever eventuality, really, I think. And it's just, I think for me, my social was just trying to make sure that because she knew I was doing it on my own. So it was like, are you really sure you're ready for this process to start? Because it will bring up lots of big emotions, undoubtedly. Yeah. Yeah,
it's an understatement.
Yeah, so I think it was a lot of it was, just to kind of, check that I was in the right place, really.
So then you set about searching. How did that search go? What was that? Where do you even start?
Yeah, good question. I went to the library and I did births, deaths and marriages, and you do it on one of those old, I can't think what the machines are. Yeah. I'd never used one of them in my life, and it was in this dark bit of Leeds library, and I felt very grown up doing it. That's for certain. But I found them really, really quickly. I found them in half an hour. They'd got married, and...
So that's your biological mum and dad?
Yes. Sorry, my biological mum and dad had got married. Yeah, they were 18. They were both 18 when I was adopted. And they'd been in a relationship for a while, I think. And then got pregnant, and it was my biological mum's father that was well known in the community and didn't want her to bring shame on the family. So yeah, forced her to give me up, really.
So, I mean, that's an unusual story in those times, isn't it? So that's mid-80s, is it?
Mid-80s, yeah. Yeah, it's not like it was the 50s, the 60s.
So even that, I mean, I know there's more to the story, but even that in of itself, what goes through your mind? Because that's...
What, that they went on and got married? Yeah. Oh, where's the rest of the kids? Is what went through my mind. I thought they must have gone on to have more kids. They'd got married. I think that was the first thing. And part of me was really, happy that they'd got married, actually. Because I thought, whether this was a thought at the time or whether it was a thought after, I thought at least it's not gone on to completely rip them apart as it does lots of people. I thought it was a good thing.
So you've got this really emotive sort of nugget of information. What do you do next?
Yeah, so I look for siblings, and I find siblings. I think I find 2 at the library, and then I go home and I find another 1 through Facebook. I don't speak to them via Facebook, I just search for the names. And then I can't remember when I found out about the 4th, so they went on to have 4 more children, so yeah.
And what do you do with that information? Because you've you're just then in this holding position where you kind of, what's do you then, I mean, immediately rush out? Do you hold it? What are you thinking?
I don't rush out. I don't even remember ringing and telling my dad or my parents. Oh, I told friends. I told my housemate. And then I think I just go back to the social worker and say, look, this is what.
Yeah.
What? And I do remember my social worker saying to me at the time, she said, this is really, really unusual, Tanya. We just don't ever really come across this. Yeah. But it wasn't unusual in the context of the family that I was removed from. Well, I wasn't removed, I was relinquished, but it feels like I was removed.
Yeah. Well, yeah. You've got this information, it's really unusual. But when do you reach out? How do you reach out?
Pretty much straight away. So my social worker wrote a letter to my birth's mum and dad, and at the address that they had. Because I remember this whole thing about they might not live there anymore and all that type of... Anyway, so, but we got a letter back kind of straight away, so that process maybe took a week.
Right.
Not even that. The letter that she sent back was written at the early hours of the morning, because she writes in it that she's writing in the early hours of the morning. And it's very much kind of, we've kind of been waiting for the day for this to happen.
Right. Type
of letter. Yeah.
I mean, does that feel like a pressure on you all of a sudden?
No, I don't think so. I don't know. I don't think so.
Right.
Yeah, not a pressure. I just remember thinking, at one point, a bit of kind of, oh crap, like, what have I done?
Right. You've opened the door and...
Yeah, I've opened the door now, and it's kind of, there's no going back now.
Mm-hmm. So tell me the process, what happened then? How did you go on to then...
So we carried on writing letters for about 3 years, and we didn't meet for a while because she had something going on in her family that she was dealing with. A family member was really poorly, so she couldn't. I say she because I had the most communication with my birth mum, and I had some communication with my birth dad, but it was mostly through her. But yeah, she couldn't cope with everything that was happening, and so we didn't meet up for about 3 years, I think. Yeah, and then we did finally meet up, and and then we carried on meeting for about, trying to think, up until about I was 30, and I'm 34 now. So a space of like 2 or 3 years, I think we met up.
Right.
Every few months, every 4 months or so.
So what was that meeting like? It sounds like it's not been easy.
No. And I've never heard of an adoption story that is. You need to find me one that is.
Like the telly.
Like the telly, like that freaking program, Long Lost Families. Oh God. Yeah, no, it wasn't easy. I don't ever know how it can be. I mean, I think I was incredibly nervous when we met up, really nervous, because I think it's a bit like, oh my God, are they going to like me? What am I going to say? And I had massive self-esteem and confidence issues anyway.
Yeah. So
that played into it. And I think you're just kind of putting yourself on a plate. You're just, yeah. And they were together as well. They had each other. So I had my social worker who I was a really good relationship with, but it's not the same, is it? I didn't have someone that was my that had been through it.
Connected.
You know, yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think that's always a bit of a difference. And I remember reflecting on it afterwards with my social worker, because my birth mum and birth dad were, my birth mum in particular was kind of, she was very lovely and spoke a lot, very proud of her family, and was interested about me, but there was kind of a bit of a disconnect. So not a cold, she wasn't cold, but you know, we spoke about it, and it was like, I wonder if because I was relinquished from a baby, she'd never held me actually in hospital. I found out later after having me, after having my own child, I cannot imagine what that must be like. But I think, you know, I wonder if someone seeing their daughter as an adult can't make that connection. So it doesn't surprise me that was very much the feeling that I got from her, because I don't know how you put those. And plus, my birth name was different to what my adoptive name is. So
right.
My original, so she knew me as my original name, and then meeting me as a different name, that's also another factor to play in it.
Oh, that's really complicated, isn't it?
Yeah.
For everyone concerned, because you're you, aren't you?
Yes. It's awful now thinking about it, but I laughed about the name that she gave me, and not in a mean way, but because I could never imagine myself being that. And that must have been quite painful for her, and I didn't think of that, but because I've got a little picture that says my original, a little Polaroid that says my original birth name underneath. It's very, so I'm not surprised it's not worked out, really, to be honest.
I mean, you just describe this convergence of events that are just never going to work.
No.
Every interaction is loaded with so much stuff.
Yeah.
And it's none of it's about you.
No. No, really. No.
Wow. I know you're laughing, but it's not funny, is it?
No, it's not funny. No, it's not funny. No.
Really important. I don't know whether you want to mention your siblings, in that is part of it, that they didn't necessarily know about you. Is that not something that you don't want to kind of unpack?
No, I can talk about that. Yeah, I mean, I guess one of the biggest reasons it didn't work out between us, and I mean, I've left the door open and said, if and ever when you're ready, I'll be here. But we'll see. I mean, I've got 4 birthdays, 2 that are fairly similar to my age and 2 younger. 2 younger ones did not know about me, and my birth parents just couldn't bring themselves to tell them about me. So I just couldn't carry on meeting up with them, because I didn't think it was fair on anyone, really. And I think there's a number of things. I think she wanted me to go around and knock on the door and be like, "Hey, I'm the one.
I'm the sister you never knew about."
Yeah. I think, and I remember kind of saying it to her once, and I think that would have been much easier for her to manage than for her to actually tell her children, which is what an awful position to be in. I mean, the shame that she must feel is quite unbelievable. I think she just thought her daughters would reject her, which is quite
wow.
So I was just like, I'm never going to do that. I'm never going to be that person that goes, I'm not going to be the Jeremy Kyle banging on your door saying hi. You didn't know about me. So I was categorically kind of, well, I can't carry this on if they don't know.
Was that hard to sort of draw that line and just say, look?
It probably took longer than it should have done.
Right.
Yeah. I think it got to a point where I was just kind of like, I can't keep having unmeaningful contact with you. I can't keep meeting up every now and again and it being in secret and you having to... Yeah, it's just not... it was just not healthy for anyone, really. And again, it was me looking out for me. So, and me looking out for them and me looking out for... Yeah.
But again, it's sort of that theme of it wasn't about you. It was there was an element of her protecting herself from that shame.
Yeah, it wasn't about me. But.
I mean, that's all really emotive stuff. In the middle of all that, I know that you were qualifying to be a social worker.
Yeah.
Just as you do. And what had inspired that choice of profession? Because I know that you'd not necessarily, that wasn't where you were heading when you set off. That's where you've sort of ended up.
Yeah. Well, it was because of the process that I was going through. I was really struggling with, I'd done an undergraduate and I was really struggling with kind of the concept of going out into the big wide world and being a professional in what I'd done an undergraduate in. I was like, I just had such little belief in myself and self-confidence that I met my social worker and I was like, okay, right, maybe I can do this. A bit naively, because social work is an incredibly challenging job, and if you have low confidence and self-esteem, you've got to bloody work on it quickly, because
it's going to press those buttons, isn't it?
It is absolutely going to press those buttons, and they need to teach that on a social work course because they don't. So a bit naively thought, well, I can work in adoption because I know it, and I just know it. I get it, especially after that reunion that I've been through and the stuff with my parents. I kind of thought, wow, because I could see it from all sides. I kind of thought I can do this job.
I find that remarkable because you've just described this story that's it sounds like a really difficult story, and you could even argue that actually for you adoption hasn't. I mean, you're a functioning adult.
I am.
Clearly, thank you. But in the midst of all that, there's been a lot of adversity that has been born out of adoption in of itself. You weren't a child rescued from you weren't rescued from a horrific abuse situation.
No.
So are those two things easy to reconcile, that you're then you're promoting it, well, not promoting, but actively supporting a system that I'm perhaps asking, I'm not sure, is that a leading question? I'm not sure I should ask.
Yeah, I've never thought that my adoption was, I've never been angry at the system for it. And maybe I should be, but I figured, and maybe it's a self-protective thing. I know that it would never happen now. I know that I wouldn't have been relinquished, and they would have seen her as a vulnerable person, and what my biological granddad had to say wouldn't have even come into it. There'd have been a lot more support. I would have never have been adopted.
Right.
Now.
Yeah.
However, I look at it in the context of the past, and I think adoption was even in 1985, was a very twin set and pearls, very different system. And so I kind of look at it as though mistakes were made. It shouldn't have happened. I should be probably with my biological family. But do you know what? I'm an awesome person, actually. And the life that I've had, and my parents, I've had a great life, really. And I've turned out into a good human being, so I don't think that actually it's such a bad thing. Yeah.
It was a leading question, so I'm not trying to I don't want to put words in your mouth.
No.
So then you qualify and you work in adoption.
Can I just add to that
certainly.
though? I can totally see why people are angry at the system.
Right.
And, that's just my perspective. So I can fully see why people are frustrated. And another person who'd been through my situation might see it completely differently. So I can appreciate that.
Thinking about you practicing within the adoption world, and one of the key things around any social work practice is that you have to sort of flag up when your own buttons are being pressed and when your own experience is perhaps has potential to influence the work that you're doing in a negative way or in a way that isn't helpful. And is that something that because what exactly do you do within your adoption practice?
So I started off working on adoption panels, and then, just one panel actually, approving adopters. And then I became the Adoptees project worker, and I've done that for nearly 5 years now, which is a group supporting teenage adoptees. And then I also do some kind of what I call therapeutic social work I mostly work with teenagers again. I sometimes work with parents. So I do things like life story. And I do the CPV, child-to-parent violence, with parents.
Right.
So I do quite a mixed bag of stuff.
All right.
And what was the first part of your question about how my buttons are pressed?
Yeah,
and that's always been tricky, and it will always continue to be tricky because it's forever present, I think. And not meaning I'm always thinking about my own stuff all the time, but I think what it is when I work with people and they are maybe going through some of the same emotions that I've been through, or they maybe have some of the same self-esteem or lack of confidence things, or they're forever doubting themselves, or they can't see where their future's going. I think that I can really relate to it. Yeah. So that can be not triggering for me, but I can really kind of, I think it's a two-way thing. It can trigger, but it can also be really helpful because I can really empathise and I can really understand where someone's coming from. And when adoptive parents are struggling to relate to their children, I can see that angle because I've experienced it. Yeah. And when so it's helpful. It's a hindrance and a massive help at the same time. So, and I guess I think one of the other really powerful things about me working in adoption is that through the work that I do and through the therapeutic tools that I've learned, I therapize myself in a way. I mean, I do also go to a lot of therapy and continue to do so. I think everybody should go to therapy because it's amazing. So I know how to look after that. I really have used those tools to think, right, I can look after myself in that way, or I can do that, so it's been a bit of a saving grace for me working in adoption, I think, really.
You seem really pragmatic about your experience. You've got what seems like quite a balanced view of things. But are there elements of the adoption system that you perhaps think, we should change that, or that is an area that is not helpful, or thinking about the work you've done in panels, the work you were doing with young adopted people. Is there anything? I mean, I don't want to draw you at the rocks or get you into trouble with your boss, but
no. I'm just going to say a really cliche answer, but it's a cliche for a reason. I really wish my job, and I'm not naive, adoption will always exist, but I wish my job didn't have to exist. I wish that the money, and I think National Adoption Week's made me think about this even more. Like, I just wish the support's at the wrong end. It's at the wrong end. I think that why are we waiting for children to be taken into care? Why are families not getting the support that they need? Why is it such a postcode lottery? The trauma that does to families and women, and children. I think the system from that perspective needs looking at. You know, because I often work with families when it's really hit crisis, and it's not a good time to be working with families. And not that it's not a good time, but you want to be working much earlier with families. And
so is that families are reluctant to kind of put their hands up and say, actually, we're struggling? What do you think? Why do you think people are reluctant
to ask for help? I think it's a mixture of things. I think lots of families are good at asking for help anyway. But I think, you know, maybe at the beginning you've been given lots of information, and I've spoken to parents who've said, you know, I wasn't listening, I didn't want to hear that information. It's I put my hands up, we said the right things, we did what needed to be done, but I wasn't kind of really fully taking that on board. And then, you know, therapy's offered right at the very beginning when placements are made, and it's like, well, we don't want therapy right now, thank you, we're too busy being a family, we don't need more. And also they've been through a really, you know, the assessment process, which is intrusive, but intrusive for exactly the right reasons. And I think it should probably be longer and more intrusive. And then, you know, you get down the line and it's like, things are, and I hear lots of people saying, is it the adopted bit of the child, or is it just their developmental stage? So is it adoption, or is it just where they're at you know? And so that kind of, and then it'd be like, all right, we'll just leave it. And then I think that's what happens. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then I think it just gets to a boiling point, and it's like, oh crap, we really need to ask for help now.
But by then, perhaps behaviours are entrenched, or issues are...
Or there's block care, or there's,
complicated. You mentioned preparation of adopters. So how would you prepare, if magical thinking, how would you prepare adopters? Because right now is it a 6-month approval process? 6 months,
yeah. How would I prepare? I'd send them all to therapy for a year. I would. I just think you need to know your own stuff. I think they probably need to go to therapy for longer than that, but you need to know your own stuff and own it. And it's the same, isn't it? It's the same as what I have to do in work. I shouldn't be projecting my stuff onto people, and parents shouldn't be projecting their stuff onto children. And I think that happens, and I don't want to sound like I'm blaming people. It's just part of if you're not realising what's going on. If you've got stuff that's happened to you in your past, you might talk about it through your adoption assessment, and it can be cathartic, but it's probably not enough. I genuinely think people just need to, does that sound a bit harsh? I don't know.
I mean, it's always a challenge as an adoptive parent that actually at the time it's felt like a long time, but then looking back, you go, how much of that was I just saying what I needed to say? Yeah. Because I was goal focused, not process focused.
Exactly.
But then it's a powerful lobby, isn't it? Because the government is always looking for new adopters, and they want to make that process as palatable as possible. Mm-hmm. So complicated.
But there's a time constraint, and it's anyway. Yeah.
Lots of thoughts.
Sorry.
I mean, I've asked lots of questions. Is there anything that you any burning issues, any thoughts?
I think for me and I've written about it in my blog, and I think there's something about, I'm not massively on Twitter. I am for the projects, and I am sort of personally, but not really. And I know from the work that I do with teenagers who are transitioning into adulthood, is that there is just nothing for us adult adoptees out there. And there's lots of people coming forward now and using Twitter as a platform, which is great, but I think there just needs to be, I really wish and want there to be more support for people like me who maybe thinks that their story isn't valid anymore, or it's been forgotten about, or we're not important, or they're just grappling with kind of all the bonkers emotions that it throws at you, and maybe they don't have the support of their adoptive parents, or they've moved away from their adoptive parents, and they're trying to, I think there's lots and lots and lots of adult adoptees out there that I think need more support.
Yeah, that's clear, isn't it? That's very true. Very true, yeah. Excellent.
Yeah. And for, I've got some of the teenagers that are transitioning into adulthood, and that whole what a tricky stage of life, and for services to be dropped at 18 and move into adult services, yeah,
really difficult.
Very difficult.
Yeah. Well, Tanya, thank you so much for talking to me, and I really appreciate
thank you.
You telling your story and being really honest. And I know people can find you at the PAC UK blog. You sort of you run the Adoptee's Twitter feed, don't you? So we'll put all the links up and stuff.
I do. Yes.
So if people want to get in touch with you, they can do it through that, can't they? So that's wonderful.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.